are on the air. On the air now. Hello.
Hello.
So Andy, why don't we just go ahead and say the episode is starting now, and why don't you just tell everybody about the collab that you did, because I would love to inform our audience about this, and I think we'll just start the recording from 3, 2, 1.
Oh, you go in there. I'm good. Oh, me. Okay, got it. All right. Yeah. That's the other thing. Yeah. So I'm briefly going to talk about the. This can be my review for the night because I've done so little gameplay. I don't have any review anyway. So I got to be a guest on our lovely Cardboard Cohorts podcast with Norm and Luke. Who's the third person that's on that usually?
Ryan.
That's right.
Ryan Rao.
Yeah, he wasn't on last night, so the name didn't. Not that I'm great with names anyway, but they were kind of wanting to do like an 18xx focused episode, and being that Luke's like the only one in that crew that's played that to any degree, they asked for some guests to be on, and they asked me and Tony Fryer, formerly of Heavy Cardboard, now bouncing around the odd podcast talking about 18xx and diehard train gamer. And we just kind of talked about like what 18xx's we've been playing this year, what the system kind of means to us and why. And then we kind of briefly talked about some games that we were enjoying or not enjoying. I decided to be like the one a little more dissenting. Because normally when someone's like, pick 3 games you want to talk about, everyone picks like the 3 greatest experiences they've had. Mm-hmm. So I went with like, I loved this game too. This game's fine too. I never want to play that damn thing again. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I met Tony Fryer at HeavyCon several years ago when I went, and we kind of shoot emails back and forth occasionally about train games and print and play stuff. And he's just a super good guy. And so is Luke. We've never met in real life, except we're pretty consistently involved in train games online these days. But it was a lot of fun. We just kind of went over like 18xx's, what we like, ones we played and enjoyed, kind of ones we're looking forward to playing in the semi-near future, and our goals for 18xx playing. Which the only one I had is I still have like 2 that have never seen the table, and I just want to knock that out.
Are they realistic? Which ones are they?
I have 54. Like, yeah, the bundle one that's 44 and
44, 54.
Yeah, I've never played 54, literally. Like, okay. I've done 44 like 3 times, but I've never done 54. And it's bonkers too, because it's got like the hexagonal stock market.
Mm-hmm.
So not only do you like change position on the stock market, if shares are sold or bought or whatever, but apparently in that one you also change positions on the stock market based on whether you're buying or selling trains as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if you you lose your train, investor, and you don't have one to replace it, investors are like, oh my god, they're in ruin, get out. And so you take a hit there. And then it's weird too, because they got like this separate mini map that's for local trains. So it's like one of the cities blown up into a mini map. And you run these weird local trains. I don't know. 00 games do like the weirdest things in 18xx. So it's always fun. The other one I have is 35, which I believe is an oldie. Like it's, one of those first batches that I think came out right after 1830, 1829. It's actually designed or co-designed by Francis Tresham. So I want to try that one a lot. It's got a weird one. Like apparently the game is actually broken.
Really?
But it's an easy fix. Yeah, because basically, how almost all of them have like an initial auction kind of thing.
Yeah.
The way it used to work was not the traditional 1830 auction, but basically you could go and order, buy it, or do this or whatever. But the way it worked out is whoever was in a certain turn order and knew what they were doing could pick up like two things that were just going to exceedingly increase their odds of winning the game. It wasn't like a for sure, but it was like if anyone knew what they were doing and got that, nobody had a prayer.
Sure.
So the easy fix was basically like to take the restrictions off what you can buy. Just like buy whatever you want. So there's not really an auction per se. There's just a bunch of minors and privates laying on the table. You just go, I'll take that one. Next person, I'll take that one. So it kind of fixes that. The other thing I really thought was neat about that one, though, is that at a certain point in the game, you can buy your shares back from other players, whether they consent to it or not. So if you get to like, if you get like the Uber company that's paying out buttloads in dividends, you can just be like, you know what? I'm all in on my own. I'll take that one back and I'll take that one. You can own up to 100%.
Wow. 100%.
But the shit is you have to pay 1.5 times its value to the person you buy it from.
Okay.
So you have to pay more than it's worth. So basically it's like
payoff.
Yeah. Will the payoff from the dividends equal out me paying that person more? But yeah, it's kind of neat. And then it's got, I think, a national railway too, and those are kind of fun. So, but yeah, we just kind of talked about things we were wanting to do, and all that. And what was it? One of the things we didn't get to is Luke wanted to know. It's like, what other 18xx content is there? Are there any podcasts focus on 18xx? And I'm like, one that I know of now.
Yeah, there's one that's kind of shorter, isn't it?
Yeah, God, and
isn't it weird that like the 18xx podcast runs like 45 minutes, but the games run like 10 times that?
Yeah, they're just keeping it down. They actually do a good job. I don't know. They're in England. God, I can't remember the name of that podcast now. I'll have to look it up later. But yeah, because I don't there was Dual Gauge and they have not done anything in a long time. I think I'd heard at one point like Kyle, the guy running it, got just crazy busy.
Yeah.
And then like Heavy Cardboard. Like once Tony left, a lot of the 18xx content just like I think he was the one really pushing that.
Sure.
We didn't get into it because, it was weird. Like, someone told me a while back, they're like, dude, you're one of the main media voices for 18xx. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I am. That's sad, really.
Well, I mean, Andy, you also do play. I mean, you play a significant amount because even if you don't get it played that much in person now, you have enough online games that you're constantly playing.
Yeah, no, I don't know. If I had to count on my plays, I'm pushing 50 or plus of the system these days. So I would like to say that makes me good at those games, but realistically, I still don't win them very often.
I have like about 15.
Yeah. So it's a good time. But yeah, we talked about that and just, yeah. And in reality, I don't blame anybody on 18xx as far as content creation because 18xx games just do not lend themselves well to that kind of thing, I think. Because the amount of time, because like with a podcast, if you don't have a fairly regular release schedule, it's pretty easy for the podcast to just die off. And when you want to play an 8-hour game multiple times before you talk about it,
it's tough.
That's pretty tough. I would honestly, I would think it would be really hard to have an 18xx focused podcast, even if 18xx was all you played. Like it would just be hard. But yeah, no, it was a good time. I don't know. I like getting on and talking with people, and I don't know, like Norm and all that. Those guys, they actually like to keep their episode lengths consistent. So I tried to behave myself more than normal. Like, was it before we started? Luke's like, well, here's how I would like to script it, and here's some notes to think about. And I'm like, wow, they're way more with it. Wait, we just get on a BS. That's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, it was pretty good. No, it was a good time. I did have to give them crap about being polite once, just because it was fun. So, because at the end of it, I was like, okay, one more question, guys, before we leave. I was like, Luke, Norm, would you guys apologize before you dumped a company on somebody?
Nah.
So I'm like, down here in America, we just look at just like, oh, look, you want to own this. Like, you bought 3 shares. You were totally invested. Here you go.
Mm-hmm. It's your own fault.
Yep. But no, it was a really good time. It's always kind of nice occasionally to jump on, somebody else's podcast and see how they do things and talk to people and whatnot. They don't really do like the live broadcast with the chat though, and I kind of missed that aspect. Like since we've been doing like the chat thing, I really enjoy that.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of which, we've got some active chat going on at this moment. Just jumping in there, we had Jason just jump in, Keegan just jumped in, and Murr. It wouldn't be, it just wouldn't feel right without you, Murr. It's to that point. As well as Jerry. I hope that Jerry's doing well. I know that Andy, do you have anything to add to what you already have said in the guild? I know Jerry had recently tried playing an 18xx game, and 1846 was kind of sounds like there was some external factors that were adding some pressure to the experience, that kind of, made for a rushed experience, if you will. I don't know exactly. Do you remember what you said?
If I've looked at that recently.
Oh, I remember if you haven't looked at it recently, dude. Link incoming.
Link incoming.
Yeah. Link incoming. Trent incoming. Yes, here he is. How's it going, Trent?
All right, I guess.
Yeah, here is in our live chat. There is the thread, which it's 1889. Yes, 1889, which I would personally have thought was a good fit for that first experience, considering that the classic 1830 is the one that one gets compared to the most.
I think 1889 is a good start. It's
1830 with a little bit smaller map, basically.
Yeah. Although we did talk about on Tuesday, because Tony Fryer got a chance to play it. He said 18 Chesapeake that's coming out, that it completely like obliterates any other 18xx as being the best teaching game. Like it's far and above, he said, the best teaching game.
Yeah, I've heard that from many people, and I'm intending to get it for that purpose.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. It looks like Jerry ended up making a calculation error that left him with $22 after being forced to buy a diesel. So
yep.
Welcome to 18xx.
Yeah, no, I mean those are the things that can happen too, because it was like I still remember the day, like Joe, I played with you and John, and we're teaching you guys 89, and like at that time I was still just pulling levers, and you're like, oh look, I can dump a company on Andy and make him force buy a diesel for it. And like you had one of those great moments, because then John like looked down at his stuff and then looked at my stuff, and he's like, oh my God, I could do that too. And I ended up like force buying 2 diesels, and then you both just bought the companies back for me because I had no money to keep enough shares in them.
That's how you play the game. That's part of the fun of it.
Oh yeah, no, John's like, I don't feel like I should do this. I'm like, no, you should. Like I was dumb. I left myself wide open. You totally should like shove the knife in.
So here's a tip for 18xx beginners. Don't buy 2 shares in some random company you don't really know much about and someone else is running, because they'll probably dump it on you. And then you'll be stuck owning it and have like 2 shares in it and be suddenly spending all of your money buying like one train for that company, and then someone else will just buy it back. And then you get nothing out of the deal and have basically almost gone bankrupt. Don't buy just 2 shares in a company. Don't. My beginner's tip.
Absolutely, yes. Either have one or have a bunch.
Right.
Yes.
The one that's like fun is as you get experienced is when you start like playing a little bit more of an investor game, and it's just like playing chicken because it's like, how long can I hold on to these shares before it screws me? And to make that judgment, like you really have to know kind of how the trains come out, and you're gonna have to know like in what the progression of the game might be and that kind of thing. You tend to keep a real close eye on how much money the company has. And then if it gets down, I'm like, we're getting to a phase change and they don't have enough money to buy the next train type. Okay, sell down. They're like, but I was making so much money. I'm like, yeah, but you're not gonna for much longer.
I apparently was melding together things that I've read somewhere on the internet. So Jerry's experience sounded like he's looking for his next fix, actually. So whatever I was saying there about there being external pressure, I was pulling that from somewhere else.
Yeah, that tends to happen. Like, I don't know.
With me?
Or me too.
Yeah. I don't like it. It's so fresh in my mind. I remember somebody else had a recent experience. I thought it was with one of the 18XX games. That might have been the one that was 1846, but it was, just kind of mentioned how the time crunch, with a regular, if you are used to a game group that meets for a game night, that it's tough to make a transition or to even, just incorporate 18XX for a one night thing.
Yeah. If your game group has been used to like 45 1 minute or even 90-minute games and playing like 2 or 3 a night, it's hard to do that. Okay, this is the only game we're playing tonight thing. Yeah, I could see that.
Very cool. All right, we've already done a countdown for this episode, by the way. We're kind of just rolling into it here. I would like to say anybody that has heard my recent experiences. I went to GammaCon 2019, which was a regional convention that is kind of with the purpose of connecting gamers in an area with the hub being Cedar Rapids, Iowa. So about 3 hours west of Chicago for those of you that that are not from the Midwest. But anyway, what really surprised me was that they run an early convention registration program, and it's like $20 for the whole convention if you buy it between about it lasts up until about a month before the con. So I mean, $20 for a whole weekend convention is not bad. I mean, if you do it at the door, you're going to pay a lot more than that. I'll tell you straight up, because that was I paid for some family members this year, and at the door, a single Saturday badge is higher than that. So $20 for the whole convention to me is a huge steal, considering how good of a space it is. And what's exciting, Trent, Andy, is that this year there was folks from Des Moines that are looking to plan a fall convention that will be held in Des Moines. That they are looking at how GammaCon runs their events and trying to take some tips from a convention now that's been running for, is it 29 years? And you can see, just anything from there was the tables each had a clip that was like poking up and had like a spring on it, where they had the table number and then another additional like name tag that said if there was any events planned, it says that on the table. You know how it is at like Gen Con, or you guys have been to Gen Con, where like, there's no real way at the table to tell what the table's for. You have to get out your program and everything. So this was a nice function. And what I learned was that the actual the thing they were using to clip it onto is apparently a special apparatus that is made to attach to an ironing board to keep the cord out of the way of your ironing. So apparently they got like an industrial, bulk supply of these things, probably at least 100 of them, to place it on the table. So I mean, that type of little life hack or convention hack is the type of thing that that was new between last year and this year, from what I recall. So just cool little things that are going to facilitate the convention running smoothly. And anyway, it's exciting to me to think that might be something that will be close and in a different time of the year. So that way it will be sort of able to work in tandem with GammaCon. So
better than the God, what was that one I heard?
PAX Unplugged. The inaugural PAX Unplugged ran opposite Board Game Geek Con.
Oh no. The one I was thinking was the one in Des Moines that says they have board games and there's like 6 sad tables with nobody at them or something.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was an empty room with the dust.
Fields of Honor or something like that. That's what it's called.
Oh, this one
I know what you're talking about.
Debunking was the one that I attended. That was like a single empty room with a dust covered box full of like Simpsons Monopoly-esque games. But and yeah, it's just like when there's nobody there that's really like behind the tabletop hobby. It takes people that love what they do to make that happen. You can go ahead and put it on a convention, but it's not really going to take off unless you have people that are really paying attention to how people interact. Because that's key to tabletop, and you interact differently in tabletop than you do in like a science fiction convention. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that, but like having an alcohol mixer at a science fiction convention might work really great. But if you're doing that at a board game convention, it's kind of going to compete with the scheduled events that you might need to do. And if you're at a board game convention, people are going to be wanting to schedule events like all the time. So I definitely think that there's a lot of thought.
Like a whiskey tasting / diplomacy game.
Buy your whiskey flight up front.
yeah. Like you get more drunk as you're playing diplomacy over the how many hours? What could go wrong? What could go wrong?
Whiskey can be an angry drunk if my lack of memory is serving me at all. Like that could be there could be more tears and more lost friendships than normal in that game of diplomacy.
It'd be good times.
Oh, come on. Yellow people, we got some folks showing up here. Let's see. Wow, 29 next year. Okay. So, apparently I got people who want me to read the chat. It's nice to see you there. And if you want to continue to exist in the chat, maybe chill. So, well, the actual start to this episode can kind of go whenever. I'm not sure. What should I do with this? We've got 20 minutes here, Andy, and maybe some of it works as a promo, but certainly some of that just works as banter. Sometimes I put that at the end of the show. So maybe I'll do what I normally do and just kind of chop this all off, put it at the end of the show, and then say, to anybody who's interested in hearing about it, fast forward to the last 20 minutes of the show and hear Andy kind of plug it, and then the conversation devolves into whatever was going on. And eventually I started reading the chat.
All right, I'm so good at keeping on topic anyway.
You really are, yeah. Mm-hmm. What were you saying again? So I'll just do another countdown just in case. 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, a podcast about board games. I'm the host of The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, Joe Sallin. Tonight I'm joined by Andrew Dennison. How's it going, Andy?
Pretty good.
Trent Ham. Trent, how you be?
Pretty good. Let's do this.
We got this. Unfortunately, TC is saving the world at this very moment. I mean that in the most genuine way possible. TC's being a really good friend, and anyway, I hope that everything is going well with the people that he's helping out. So it sounded like there were some pretty awful things going on. So anyway, TC Reed, you do you, and you keep all the people around you safe and sound, and be there for them. All right, tonight we are going to be talking about board games. As mentioned earlier, it's a podcast about board games. And we are going to be taking on some laws, some common laws, and I say this with air quotes, when people get out onto the internet or wherever else they might make their opinions known, sometimes they come up with laws as to whether, sort of like you might call these like guidelines that get misnamed as laws. But we're going to be taking on some of the popular ones. This kind of follows from a conversation that's took place on Board Game Geek and has been kind of coming up here and there. If you're familiar with Vassal's Law, which states, I believe, that if a game is worth playing, it will be reprinted. That's not word for word, but it is something to that effect. And then there's a Quinn's Law from Shut Up and Sit Down, and maybe you know of other laws out there. But we are going to, of course, be saying how wrong all of those laws are before coming up with our own replacements or our own versions of laws that other people can then, when they hear them and realize how fundamentally flawed they are, they will do the same thing as us. So that'll be our topic for tonight. Before that, we're going to review games. After that, we hype games. And before it all, thanks to the sponsor of The Good, the Board, and the Ugly, Game Surplus. Check them out at gamesurplus.com. It is an online merchant with the friendliness of a local game store and all the love and care that you would expect from your grandmother's wonderful chicken noodle soup on a nasty winter day. So, when you reach out to Game Surplus, when you purchase games from Game Surplus, let them know in your comments that The Good, the Board, and the Ugly sent you. And please use that podcast picks feature. And if you are interested in more games being added to the podcast picks, let me know about that. There are certainly all kinds of games being added all the time at gamesurplus.com. And we'd love to be able to give you a discount courtesy of this podcast that you are listening to. So we are down a review from TC, having some other things come up. We are down a review because Andy is not going to be telling us anything. So it's just going to be you and I here, Trent, the two of us. So maybe I can supplement a little bit in here and do a little bit of an extra mini review for an expansion or so. And for that reason, I'll go ahead and get it kicked off. So first, my full review. I'm going to be talking about the game Heaven and Ale. This was designed by Michael Kiesling, if you've heard of Azul or ever played that most recent Spiel des Jahres winner. It is the same designer, but he is working together with a co-designer whose name I have right here, Andreas Schmidt. So Heaven and Ale is a tile placement game in which you are going to be vying for tiles that are laid out every round. There's 6 rounds in the game. Every round, a selection of tiles would be laid out in a linear fashion. You are going to be essentially drafting these tiles by taking actions clockwise. You'll be taking actions clockwise, but you're going to be, if you've ever played Takedo or Francis Drake, or any sort of game where you have a line of worker placement in which you can take anything, anything in front of where your worker currently is, but may not move backwards. That's how Heaven and Ale works. So the worker placement spots are mostly tiles that you're going to be acquiring and placing on your player board. Your player board has 2 sides. They are called the lighter sunny side and then the darker shady side. The darker shady side, you're going to be paying for every tile, which it comes in, I believe, 4 or 5 different varieties. There's I think 5 different varieties of tile that are all tied to different beer production necessities, like water and hops and malt, I think. So anyway, you're going to be taking these tiles, and if you put them on the shady side, you pay exactly what the tile's value is. If it's 4, you pay 4. And then when you go to score that tile, it only gives you more money. You can score multiple times, though, so they are kind of an investment. If you place it on the light or sunny side, you are going to pay double. But when you go to score that tile, it actually advances a score tracker. And the way this game works is kind of like Reiner Knizia. You have like these different ingredients that are all needed to make your beer. And at the end of the game, your master brewer needs to have advanced up a track to a certain point. And if you have at least reached like the 0 point, you'll be scoring points. Woohoo! For making your beer. There are other ways to make points, but making beer is kind of the main thing in this game. The higher you've advanced your master brewer on the score track, the better your multiplier is for whatever is the lowest of all of your other scores, your other ingredients. If you know, as I mentioned earlier, there's all these different ingredients. So you're trying to get all these ingredients as high up as possible. And the higher you get your master brewer, the more efficiently you can, at the end of the game, exchange any leftover resources that exceed other resource quantities. So, you know, you can spend if your master brewer is up high enough, you can spend only 2 water or even only 1 water, you know, for all the other lacking, you know, hops and whatever things you need. So it's a very simple system. The rules in this game fit into an 8-page rule book that could have probably been slightly shorter than that. It really does remind me in a way of Azul, in that it is a game where it's not super variability is not super high. You know, from one game to the next, you're not going to be seeing a ton of new content, but the puzzle is immediately there. And what it lacks in variability, what it lacks in your sort of extra content that you've never seen before, it makes up for immediately in tension. And that to me is exactly what I enjoy about Azul. Azul, you know, once you explain the game, everything that's going to happen is kind of conceivable within your head. You know, there's not going to be anything brand new for you to have to unpack as the game goes on. And that novelty can be very exciting for players. So the lack of novelty is something that can really kind of damage a game's initial impression, especially for me, because I always think it's cool to be, you know, figuring out new things about the system. And especially if I can think that, okay, this game is different than every other game because of this. But here's the thing. In Heaven and Ale, every game is so tense, so razor sharp, knife fight in a phone booth competitive, that, you know, like every time that I am looking at what tile I'm going for, you remember this is a linear track, I'm making a decision based on what I want to get next. And what I want to get next is never absolutely guaranteed. And that's what creates this amazing amount of tension. You are constantly trying to balance the amount of coinage you have in your supply. How much are you going to, how many tiles are you going to put on your shady side and score them? Whereas, you know, how are you going to get tiles onto your light side? Because that's how you actually, the sunny side is how you actually make points. But if you don't have any money, how are you going to ever make any points? I didn't really mention a couple of other elements to the game. You have monks that when you place down will actually allow you to score things around them, which creates some interesting and difficult decisions, because the monks are all fairly well comparable to each other. But the earlier you go for a monk in the worker placement track, you know, the first monks available cost $4. The next monks only cost 3, and then 2, and then 1. So I mean, like the later the monks are, the more obvious and easy the decision is. But this just all goes into making that decision about, like, okay, how am I going to choose a tile, and what am I going to get after that tile? Because every time that you get tiles in your place, you're going to only be scoring them in 2 ways. First of all, every time that you totally enclose a specific tile, like basically they're like settlements. And if you ever get 6 tiles that all surround, they're all hexagonal tiles, so they're going to surround one space, you'll then add up the value of all those tiles. And tiles could be 1 through 5 in value. The higher your value, the more of those tiles you get to score. The lower in value, the more you get to move up your master brewer. So it's just, it's a system that's easy to initially grasp, but has tons of replayability. Honestly, this is the type of Euro game I think that you are looking for, Andy, because it doesn't have all those like things you have to learn. And because, you know, like you might enjoy that in something like Pax Porfiriana, Pax Renaissance, right? Because that's a game that's kind of about experience, that history behind it. But if you're going to play a Euro game, getting the history together with it can sometimes actually, you know, kind of clog up your mind during a learning experience. I think that Heaven and Ale has that sort of Azul-like quality of having a simple, easy to learn rule set, but immediately tense decisions to make.
Yeah.
So it's a very cool system. I'm not going to go into necessarily all that there is to offer in the game. Not that there's a ton. I mean, you just have like you've got essentially goals that you're also trying to score, which are a spot that you can go to on the board. But just to suffice it to say that it's going to be easier for you to probably, you know, just pick up and play a game of Heaven and Ale because of how simple it is. It's like a heavy gamer's version of Azul, and it doesn't share really anything with Azul, except that the same designer connects them, and to me, it pleases the same place in my brain. where I'm immediately making tough decisions, and it doesn't have to do with trying to understand a difficult to grok rule set. Heaven and Ale, the simplistic yet extremely deep and extremely tense Euro that, if that's your type of thing, I think that it does it extremely well.
Cool.
Yeah, and it looks like stained glass. I think the visuals, for the most part in the game, they give you a little bit. There's a little bit of unevenness. Your board, I at least thought that your actual board had kind of a more alive look, more real. Whereas the spaces around the board are made to look kind of like stained glass. I wish they had kind of just stuck with the stained glass look, because I think that that's what I really think looks cool in the game. But yeah, this is one that I could see teaching to my like non-gamer family members. I think that, they're going to really enjoy Azul. I've already taught them Azul. They really like it. I think this is the type of game that kind of follows it. So to compare this to Ora et Labora, it has the same, strangely enough, the same feeling of scoring that you get in Ora et Labora, where you have a central tile that activates tiles around it for points. But that's about as far as it goes, aside from being both games about monks making beer or, like alcohol. Here, that's where the similarities end. But I think that, Ora et Labora is a game that has a lot of things there, even though every game is literally identical to each other, with the exception of whether you're playing in France or Ireland. Here in Heaven and Ale, you have very much different puzzle to form every single game that's beyond just the decisions that you've already made. All right. So, Trent, any experience with Heaven and Ale?
Not a bit.
Okay. I think this is right up along the lines. I think that I really do think that this is the type of Euro that both of you guys, I think, would very much take to. So,
all right. Someone brings a copy, I'll play it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I don't currently own one, unfortunately. But yeah, well, it was impossible to find for the longest time. It's finally become available, and I wanted to play it. I wanted to play it for the longest time, and now I really want to get a hold of one. So, anyway, that's my review.
On Amazon.
It is now. Yeah, it did become available, but it was like when I was looking for it here a few months ago, it was like it was getting some of those higher prices. It was getting above the MSRP. So, fortunately, the dearth of copies has now been fixed, and you can find a copy easily. And if you do, enjoy. Hopefully, you enjoy playing the game, and hopefully, you're also in my local group, so that way I can be like, hey, I don't need to buy this game since you have it, but I really like it. Anyway, enough about Heaven and Ale. Trent, could you tell us about a very the theme of this game is fairly dark, but in a sort of justly dark way.
In a sort of Tom Cruise way. Okay, so I have played Black Orchestra a couple times. Black Orchestra is a cooperative game for 1 to 5 players, designed by Philip Dubari, published by looks like Game Salute, I guess. I didn't remember their logo being on the box, but we'll go with that.
Sure.
So the theme of Black Orchestra is you're basically a group of conspirators attempting to assassinate Hitler. This is a co-op game, so you're working together as a team, and there's an engine basically working against you, and the engine is effectively thematically on the board. It's Hitler and a bunch of his cronies moving around on the board and doing bad things to you. And if you start your turn on the same spot as Hitler or one of his cronies, bad things happen. On your turn, you can take 3 actions, of which there are a bunch of options. I'm not going to go into them, but suffice it to say, most of the gameplay is this. You're trying to set up a plot to kill him, and the plot basically requires you to have a whole bunch of ingredients. So most of the time, you're spending your time going around the map, looking for these ingredients that are on face-down tiles on the map, collecting them all together, and then hoping you have the right plot card to be able to pull it off. So what it ends up feeling like is you're going around, you're spending all of your turns, everybody is, collecting pieces, hoping that they'll all come together into some sort of plot to kill Hitler near the end of the game clock. That's how both of the games I felt like have been, is that they're essentially trying to collect a diversity of pieces, or collecting a whole bunch of the same type of pieces, depending on what strategy you choose, and then hoping a plot comes together that you can use to assassinate Hitler. So, the game is beautifully done. It's gorgeous. It's very thematic. I will say that the turns in the games I've played, like I said, 90% of the game, you're assembling pieces for a plot, or assembling pieces, but you don't know how they fit together yet. Just everybody's trying to get a lot of pieces, and then what you're hoping is when a key piece comes up, so one of the actions you can do is essentially draw a card off of this big stack of cards, some of which are these plot cards that will tell you need this tile and this tile and this tile that you picked up off the board, and then other people in your space can sometimes share them with you. Some types can be shared, some types can't. So you're waiting for one of these plot cards to come up, and then the other cards you're drawing are like one-shot special ability cards. So basically what happens is you wait around until enough pieces are assembled that someone can, quote, crack the code and figure out a way in which you have a good way of killing them. So my feeling on this game is it's a good puzzle. There is some luck on it, and I'll get back to that in just a second. But it's a good puzzle to solve. I think this would be a good one if you're like solving puzzles and putting together pieces and figuring out how something works. To play it solo, I think this would be a pretty good solo co-op if you like that type of puzzle-y thing. I feel like it's very, very alpha gameable, extremely alpha gameable. It's got the pandemic issue going on with it, in my opinion, because someone that sees the solution is just going to sit there and tell everyone else how to do it, and they're all going to go, oh yeah, that makes sense, and then you're going to do that. It's just who sees it first is basically what happens. I will say there was one thing I had that I felt a little weird about the design is that one of the actions, if you're on a space by yourself, one of the actions I could never see any reason not to do it every single round. Essentially what it is you have the option to roll 3 dice. And most of the time when you roll 3 dice for that action, it just gives you a bunch of additional actions for the round. There's very little drawback to doing it. So we reached a point where the group I played with is we couldn't ever figure out why you wouldn't just do this every round. With one exception, if you had an absolutely clear turn of using your 3 actions that were literally going to lead straight to a plot, you might not. But other than that, you're going to roll the 3 dice every round. I think it's called a conspire action, if I remember right. And it's basically the dice basically say you get a bunch of additional actions or you get some other benefit. And I really honestly couldn't see why you wouldn't do it. I know there is a minor drawback with one of the 6 die faces, but a lot of times that drawback is a non-factor and it doesn't even hurt you. So there's no reason not to do this one particular action. Just give yourself more actions. Whatever. I don't understand the design decision. That felt a little odd to me. I'll be really honest. Like, why would you just have one action that's so obviously OP that you would just do it every round? Just make it a game phase or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just felt like, why don't you just make Conspire a game phase? And I actually suggested that when we were playing, and we were like, it feels pretty much like it is. But suffice it to say, I did feel like, though, that it did offer some interesting puzzles. Now, but it's got the issue of a lot of co-ops, like I said, where it's all the information's face up on the table, and someone's just going to see the solution and solve it. For me, that's not the kind of co-op I usually go for.
Sure.
This one's a perfectly good example of a puzzly co-op, but I usually like ones like that either A, have such a complicated puzzle that one person can't alpha game it, like Spirit Island, or B, have some sort of communication barrier going on, like Hanabi or something like that. One of those 2 things needs to be going on, and Black Orchestra didn't have either. But I will say this, if you like the theme and you like puzzly co-ops and you don't mind, I think this would be a really good one to play solo. This one's a perfectly good example. I would say if you really enjoyed the experience of playing Pandemic, you would really enjoy this. And that's pretty much my feelings on Black Orchestra.
About sums it up. I mean, it looks like you've got, like you mentioned, some dice to add to the mix. And aside from that, a face-up co-op that the most recent Pandemic, by the way, does actually add dice. The Pandemic Fall of Rome has dice combat. So, but it sounds like this is more about rolling dice for a variety of reasons, like you mentioned, kind of getting yourself extra actions, which is like such a great action that why would you not?
Well, it's basically you roll the dice to give yourself a bunch of extra actions, but all the other actions don't have anything to do with the dice. So like, move your dude, flip a tile over, collect a tile, draw a card. Those are all individual actions that you would be doing. It's just that on your start of your turn, you're going to want to roll dice to give yourself more actions because that's almost always what the result of the dice roll is. 90% of the time, you're going to spend 3 actions to roll 3 dice, and end up with like 5 or 6 actions. It happens like every round. So I don't know why you wouldn't do this. Like I said, one of the 6 die phases has a mild negative effect. But half the time that negative effect is literally no consequence. And even when it is consequence, it's not that bad. So I don't see why you wouldn't just do that every round. That's what we were all doing. Just every round we were conspiring and rolling 3 dice at the start of a round. To the point where, like I said at the end, I was like, I don't know why this isn't just like a phase that you do at the start of your round. But anyway, it's
like the first move in Stone Age. It's like the scripted move, right?
Yeah, or Puerto Rico. A lot of them has like some scripted moves in them. Yeah. So.
Well, I hear what you're saying. That was Black Orchestra, designed by Philip Dewberry, who, Andy, Spirits of the Rice Paddy, is another game that he has designed. So, Andy, I believe you've played and still play Spirits of the Rice Paddy.
I still own it.
Yeah.
I thought it was a pretty solid game. There was only like one card I really questioned about. I'm really considering just keeping out of the game, but other than that, it's fine.
Sure. It looks like he also designed Rice Dice, the dice game based on it. So
yeah, I didn't get that one.
Yeah. Unfortunately, me neither. You might have to check a different source of board game.
Here's how I would describe this, if you know what I'm talking about. If you've ever seen the Tom Cruise movie Valkyrie, this is basically the board game version of it. Imagine if like Gale Force 9 made a Valkyrie game, that's basically what this would be.
But where is the it would have to include, art, which is actually stills from the movie.
Yeah, but it doesn't do that. It's I mean, it's got good. It has a lot of historical references in it. That's the feeling I got from it. It felt like a Gale Force 9 game if they made a game about Valkyrie.
Very cool. Makes sense. I will fill in just a little bit of our review section here with a short mention of the expansion to Great Western Trail. Has anybody had a chance to play the expansion Railways to the North?
Yes.
Oh, so you have, Trent. All right, cool. Well, I won't say a whole ton about it because I have not played it enough to really say whether or not. Well, I'll just expose everybody to what it includes. So
Andy's Joe's gonna expose himself.
Nah, it's not what I'm doing. So it's an expose. There
we go. Much better term.
So the first thing that it adds is a couple of buildings for every player to build, and just a couple of new buildings. You now have, I believe, 12 buildings to build instead of the original 10. These are fairly simple buildings. There's not a whole. I mean, it's nice to have, not too big of a deal. There are no new cows. Instead, the new part of the game is a board that folds in a very slick way. It actually it's a bifold board. Well, I think it's actually quadfold, but it's the way that it folds is like one of the sides, like lengthwise, is about an inch or so shorter than the top one is an inch or so longer than the bottom one, because what you actually do with this is you put it on top of the existing board, and it's supposed to line up pretty much flush with the existing board and cover up the pre-printed main board's cities, the way that you could deliver to Kansas City and all the way on to San Francisco. Now you're going to have new building, new costs, essentially, new benefits from those. And then together with that, there is a host of new cities that you must actually use a new mechanism in the game, which is tied to when you take one of those sort of minor actions, the gear actions in the game, the ones that you start with are like getting a coin or discarding, drawing a card and discarding a card. Well, now you've got an ability to discard a 2-value cow. So not a worthless cow like the jerseys that you sometimes can discard. You discard a 2-value cow to build they look like the houses from Catan. And you put that either from the starting place, you can put it at exactly one spot, or any place that you've already delivered to and has your disc on it, you can start from there. And now you have access to markets like Denver and Detroit. And there's a lot of different places that you can now go to. And there's actually a way to randomize benefits that you'll get when you go to certain places, or they offer you new options to be able to deliver and do the tougher to upgrade actions from Great Western Trail, like increasing your hand size, which you had to at least deliver with a hand size of 10, and it's really hard to get. Now you can deliver slightly less if you've previously developed connections by utilizing this mechanism. Every player is going to have, like, I think 12 or 20, 15 actually, 15 new little house things, and you're trying to get as many of them out for certain areas where you can deliver to, and the more houses you have out, the more points you get. That's essentially what San Francisco has been converted into, essentially rewarding you for utilizing this new board printed at the top. Everything existing from the game is kept fairly close to what it was. Now the penalty for delivering to Kansas City is 2 points higher, because apparently high-level play, every single player would make an early game delivery to Kansas City, because the amount of capital that gave you was just so much. Apparently now they've tried to balance that a little bit so that players are delivering to a variety of cities to start the game. And I haven't played enough to really say whether or not that was even an issue in Great Western Trail. But that's the main thing that this adds. So it's pretty much just a new thing that you can do but don't have to do. It doesn't really add any time onto the game. It's the type of expansion, I think, just a little bit of balancing of what was already there. And you can really kind of ignore this new thing, which is what I was doing. I was making choices that were supposed to be leading me to use it, but then every time I would need to use it, I would forget that I was actually doing that. So it was like I was prepping myself to do it, but then I was forgetting to use it when I was prepped for it. So you can imagine how poorly that game went for me. And now, Trent, what were your thoughts on the Railways to the North Great Western Trail?
I felt like it opened up more ways to succeed. I felt like the base game as it was, there's only about 2 or 3 really pathways you could follow to like succeed well. And I felt like this opened up more ways, and also a lot of hybrid ways to do well. So I liked it quite a bit. It made the game feel a lot more open to me. So I liked it a lot.
The one thing I've heard about the expansion was that apparently in the base game, and it's speaking as of like I think 1 maybe 2 plays of it, so grain of salt there. But what I've heard in the base game was that the builder strategy, like getting lots of buildings out, was viable but really, really hard to do as a winning strategy. And like the expansion apparently makes that not necessarily like overpowered, but a lot easier to do that. Like you could win as a builder in the base game, but it was a much more sort of fragile strategy where it could be screwed up. And with the expansion, I've heard is it makes that a much more viable route to success.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, that sounds about right. The new buildings, I feel like there was lots of cheap buildings, and I'm trying to verify whether or not those cheap buildings were just because I was finally paying attention to all the buildings that were available right now. But yeah, it does look very, very. Yeah, the new board works. I think it's a very cool addition, and the new buildings, I think, kind of help out that as well. So. Anyway, that is Great Western Trail, Railways to the Rails to the North expansion. It's called Rails to the North. Yeah, and I guess the 2 new buildings are just the builder strategy now gets a giant building that's worth 25 points and a mid-level building that is worth 4 points. So apparently I am just fabricating all the rest of that in my head. Yeah, it works, and I think that it is something that is nice if you really are enjoying Great Western Trail. I think this is something that is pretty much something that should be added to just about every game of it. I don't think that I think this is, if you're really into the game, you should get it. Okay, that's reviews for this episode. And how about from Andy? I think that you might have been one of the first to engage. Maybe it was you, Trent. So I guess if I'm wrong, correct me. But there's been some talk on the Board Game Geek forums about, what laws, like let's take a look at these laws that some of the voices, the loudest voices in board gaming, purport to be something that that is the case. Are these laws a reality? Are they just, an ideal? What do you all think?
Well, I don't know. I don't even remember because we had mentioned it was Vassal's Law and Quinn's Law. I honestly completely am drawing a blank on what the Quinn's Law one, but yeah, the Vassal's Law was like something like any game that's good will get reprinted. I think it was something along those lines. And I don't know. Like, I think for a while there, I think he threw it out there as an amusement thing. And then, like, it was weird. Like, I think people started calling him on it. And then he, like, maybe felt the need to defend it or something because he started really pushing it at that point. Like, standing by it a little more. Like, it became a little less of, like, I threw this out here as a joke kind of thing. And I don't know, like, I guess in that phrasing, like, I'm going to outright reject the concept of if a game's good, it will get reprinted. If a game is popular, it will get reprinted.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good...
I think there's at least one thing that is against that. It'll get reprinted if the people involved let the rights be available.
Yeah.
I can think of two examples immediately come to mind that disprove Vassal's Law. For two different reasons, but they both come down to rights. Dune, because the Herbert estate's insane. And
although there was somebody who got the rights to that. I don't think they're reprinting.
Yeah, they're making a new game because they're making a new game like Gale Force 9 or somebody. And the other one that comes to mind is Glory to Rome. Are those seeing reprints? No. But
who owns that? Does Chuddick still have that, or did somebody else?
Chuddick owns some portion of the rights.
Yeah.
Most of the rights rely with the guy that ran Cambridge Games Factory, who's apparently dropped off the face of the earth.
Oh, but yeah, you still can't do it because he somehow still owns it, even though he doesn't exist or something.
Yeah, publishing rights.
Yeah, there's been hints that might be resolved, but my general point is like, games can be very good and still not be reprinted. Another example is Avalon Hill Civilization. I guarantee you if that came up, I'd buy it. I'd love to have a nice copy of that. Yeah.
I mean, like Advanced Civ it's weird because we had like 2 copies of that in the group. By the way, Trent and Andy, we might have a somebody who has a home-brewed version of Advanced Civ that is looking to get a gameplay. But anyway, that's sorry to those of you out there that are nowhere around us because that's just us. But yeah, that's many different games where the examples are like that. I think if a game is good enough, or he might as well just say if a game is fun, right? Because then he'd really have connected with me because saying if a game is good. There are so many things that prevent a good game or a fun game, a well-designed game, a solid game from connecting with an audience. And just because it hasn't connected with an audience doesn't mean, that it's not a good game. But the idea that it will be remade or will be made available if the community asks for it. I mean, come on, think about this, okay? There is enough people out there that really want to see the next Game of Thrones book, Game of Thrones, the 6th book. And, instead George R.R. Martin was like, no, I'm going to give you a 700-page lesson from a Meister that is all written in the same relentless voice that I still haven't finished. Good grief. It's not, yeah. But anyway, there's a lot of different reasons. The people with the rights sometimes don't have the same vision as an audience that just wants to consume, right? It's not everything in the world is based around a consumer model. So I think that is just preposterous to say, especially any sort of a law that involves absolutes, which we're probably going to be using later on.
I actually like the Quinn's policy a little bit better. I like that one a little better, which is for reliable purchases, find games that have been republished with new artwork. I actually agree with that a little more.
That's true, because it'll get... Yeah, that's the other thing, I think, kind of to maybe bridge both of them in a way. Maybe this is because something I've been thinking about. Because when you get down to it, what you got to remember about board games is like, as much as people say like their art and other stuff, ultimately it's a business, right? Like that's what publishers mostly want to do. And so you may not get a reprint of a good game if the number of copies you can sell doesn't mean anything. So like, you could make like the greatest game on earth for 500 people, let's say, but that probably will never get reprinted again because, we've saturated the small market of the people who think this is the most awesome thing in the world. But, that kind of thing, because ultimately it's going to get republished by a publisher who looks at that and goes, oh, I can probably sell enough copies of that to be worth my time to do it, which kind of brings it back to the more popular thing. Like if you look at, the one I think that's more near and dear to my heart is Capstone Games, because I think he saw a market that other people didn't see, in the sense that there were a lot of games that traditional publishers were just going, it's not worth reprinting. Like, and they're great games, right? Like Arkwright is awesome.
But I think, though, that, Andy, that like the emergence of Capstone almost validates Vassal's Law in saying that, like, well, if it's a good enough game, it will get that reprint.
Yeah, but it doesn't have an audience there to buy those new reprints. And that's the thing I think where you might notice with Capstone that's different. Like Clay very much, as much as he loves games and all that, like he runs that ship pretty tight. Like he's a good businessman.
Mm-hmm. He tries to make sound business decisions. I agree.
Right. And so you might not see that, but there's a lot of like, little boutique games that may not get reprinted, or if they do, it's going to be a long cycle on the reprints. Like
we just had until Tom Russell. I mean, like Tom Russell's entire model is based on making games available that otherwise wouldn't be available. So I guess there's even more proof that, if a game is good enough, it will become available somewhere. And I do think, Trent, that what you're talking about there might be considered exceptions, right? Like any grammar law in the English language, it usually is riddled with more exceptions than many cases actual instances that follow the rule. And to be fair, when Tom says this, he's basically saying, like, play what's available and don't worry about the games that are impossible to find, which I do think is a valid point. But it's, speaking in the absolutes is more the issue that anytime that I'm going to take issue with it is like saying that every good game gets reprinted, because right now there is publishers out there and there are designers out there that, especially designers that are sitting there like gritting their fists, like clenching their fists, I should say. Geez, gritting their fists, apparently clenching their teeth and gritting their fists because they have sold the rights to their game to a company that is doing nothing with it. And they feel like this game has the ability to really make themselves known, and there is nothing they can do. And I know this because I've talked to designers that were in this situation.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I guess that's something to keep in mind, is it's ultimately, it is about business and sales and getting that. And I know it can be kind of frustrating too. I would think like trying to publish a board game would be an interesting but yet tremendously frustrating experience. Just from, listening to a little bit about when we had Tom Russell and what he talked about, or the game I still haven't played, but you guys have the Trading on the Tigris or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Like I listened to all the Ludology episodes about the making of that game and the attempts to pitch that game and how annoying that was, where it'd just be like months of no contact. To where it got to the point, I know Jeff Engelstein was like, I swear I'm getting this out somehow. If I have to just throw it on the web and say, here you go, but somehow this game is getting out there.
Yeah, to be fair, that game works, and I'm glad that he fought for it, because it's a space that I didn't think would work, and they made it work, which doesn't surprise me, because that's Jeff Engelstein, and that guy's brain is constantly busy trying to make the impossible possible in board games.
Well, it was a good one anyway, just to hear like Ryan go through like as someone who had never designed a game, everything he went through. So he's just like, what was it? The one that I laughed about what he did. He's like, I learned a valuable lesson. Don't spend a lot of time finding artwork for your first and even or 10th prototype.
Nice.
But he was an educator too. He said, though, when he was making his prototype, those like, every class or school, or at least in the library, has the giant super choppy paper cutter thing.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, that was great for cutting out cards.
Mm-hmm. So I'd like to shift the focus now to Quinn's Law, because you mentioned it, Trent, and introduced it. The idea from Quinn's from Shut Up and Sit Down, that if you are going to be buying an edition of the game, that find a new edition of the game that has been made with new artwork. Now, I think there are many instances of games that have seen new artwork added to them, and yet people still clutch, they clutch very near and dear to their heart onto older editions of the same game. And I think that, there's probably people that are in our chat right now listening to this, probably people that are listening in their car and are thinking about, the original version, that mid-90s version of Avalon Hill's Acquire, the one that's like all plastic and really nice, like, the new version of Avalon Hill, and this is from a game from Hasbro. And I think that a lot of, eventually as the decision becomes more and more corporate, at least in the American model, as we see in Wizards of the Coast, like the new editions of Acquire are not like becoming better. They're just becoming more like, just kind of made to look nicer, but be crappier, if that makes sense. Like the new like hotels, they look pretty cool, and then once you like start feeling them, it's like, wow, this is almost like it seems almost like something that you should pitch. Like it's like the inside of an insert that fell off and you should throw it away. Like they're not like miniatures, they're like hollowed out, and I think they still look pretty cool. They have weird flags that stick in them, but in those cases, like I'd say, my counter to Quinn's Law is, if you're going to buy an edition of the game, buy an edition that works. Buy the edition that if you specifically are looking for a game because you played one edition and loved it, and you loved everything about that edition, the newer edition is not necessarily going to be superior. Sometimes new editions come out of a game that actually come with less content. Cosmic Encounter has seen so many different reprints, and maybe our chat will tell us which is the definitive Cosmic Encounter. Of course, if you want to be able to continue to get new content, you have to choose the newest version. But really, which
there's the ones that argue for those little like weird rocket ship one that came out before Fantasy Flight. But that happens. Like I'm sure there's someone out there that's going, I loved my first edition Dominant Species with the god-awful artwork. Don't tell me which one I can play.
Minimalist artwork is what they would say, Andy. They wouldn't say god-awful. I love my god-awful game.
I don't know if I do that, but I'm odd, so it works.
Yeah. I would say that there are definitely instances that are proof of Quinn's Law holding up. I think the most recent one I can think of, Endeavor. The Endeavor Age of Sail has this whole separate entry in Board Game Geek. It deserves it. So many things were done right in that edition, and it actually, that by itself has almost got me to back a new project from that company, just because I trust that company. I love the direction that they're heading in by having better storage options in a box, which is where the Eurogamer in me wants to go. I don't want nicer pieces that, sacrifice portability and storage solutions. I want, storage solutions that have pieces that are made to look nice and balance that together with how they store and how functional they are, I suppose.
And no blister packs of minis.
No. Where the hell do you put those?
I know it's yeah. What was the example I can think of that I think best exemplifies? I don't know.
Sure.
That is Brass, the new editions of Brass. Like they went in terms of artistic quality, like that's a whole order of magnitude superior art-wise than the old edition. Now you might be able to argue functionality a little bit, but you can't look at those new editions and like then how crazy the Iron Clays thing went with it, you know. But yeah, I mean, those were, you know, both good games that essentially got that super upgraded version thing.
Sometimes there's a charm that gets lost though. Like the amazing cool look of the box, you know, the box art of Lancashire, you know, with the sort of scowling. It's like the new, like a new chapter in frowny Euro face, you know, the guy's got like the pipe and everything. Very cool, but like I really like the original War Frog artwork, specifically that game. And there's other games that have some War Frog artwork. I love the artwork in A Few Acres of Snow, especially for the French militia and the Coureur de Bois. Like those to me are like I love those specific pieces of art, and they're not going to be present in any new edition of the game. It's just not going to happen, right? Those are something that I've latched onto. So, you know, buy the version of the game that lets you play the game. That's the most important thing.
You know, what I would say instead of artwork, though, is I think if any old game gets a deluxe version, like, you know, because if you're going to go with the deluxe version, like, I think you got to be able to justify that price in a way. Like, you have to know you're going to be selling enough copies and enough people will want that to make it worth it. Like, what did I hear? They're finally doing a deluxe Castles of Burgundy, maybe?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Apparently, they just released an app for Castles of Burgundy too. If you can actually get it to finish the game.
But
$9, and apparently it crashes your system.
I didn't have trouble with that.
It's got new artwork.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, you know, if we're talking Quinn's Law here, is why the crap has it taken this long to get a deluxe Castles of Burgundy? Like that had to be a weird rights issue because that game is good enough and the production quality of the original piece is crappy enough that there had to be enough people that would say, yes, I would buy. I've been saying that for years that, yes, I would buy a deluxe version of Castles of Burgundy. And it
was one of those publishers fighting things. There was a publishers fighting thing between, I believe, Aaliyah and maybe Rio Grande or something. It was an issue with the American distribution because, especially with like Puerto Rico, a lot of those like Ravensburger or Aaliyah games, like there was some weird things going on there, and that's why the Puerto Rico never saw like, you know, it saw some weird reprints, but not, you know, Germany has had access to many other things that we have not here in the States with a relation to those titles. So there's many different directions I think you can take. You know, why do you think that Quinn's Law is just so different than Tom Vassel's Law? It's, you know, to me, it's just advice. Whereas Tom Vassel's Law is actually like trying to say like this is a principle in gaming, you know. I remember when I was taking some sort of a technology class in high school in 10th grade, they told me that I think, what's the amount of years? Is it like every 7 years, technology will have doubled what it did 7 years ago, and that just keeps on going like that. There's some sort of a principle, and I don't know how they figured that out. For us, it was, you know, high school, so they didn't really go into the why behind it.
Yeah.
Moore's Law.
Moore's Law? Okay.
Moore's Law, yeah. Well, I think, you know, because I actually, you know, back at the time when the whole Vassal's Law thing came out, I was actually like watching the Dice Tower quite a bit at that point in sort of my gaming development. Which there's nothing wrong if you still do. It's just not where my tastes are these days. But yeah, he almost, I think, threw it out initially as a joke. Like, it was just very much like, haha, I did this thing, and blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, that was just his attitude. And then, okay, I'm going to insult people. Okay.
Andy, hold on. Have you learned something? What's going on? Like you're not supposed to have that thought. You're just supposed to strengthen your resolve and then say it and be proud of yourself for how bold you've been.
I actually stopped myself from being mean earlier today.
Well, I'm impressed, Andy. I'm impressed. Now you're gonna slap my head on the wall with what you're gonna say, right?
Yeah. So we'll put it this way. If someone is very, very popular and you have enough people who follow you, you will get a certain percentage of those that kind of have the cult of personality thing going on. Like they hang on their every word a little bit. And so I think he said that as a joke. And then there's some people, then like all of a sudden it started appearing in the forums as if he said it more seriously. And then there was a certain point at which he kind of almost doubled down on it. Like he stopped referring it as much of as a joke and then like started pushing it more if it was a true thing. So it was just this weird, and I could be dead wrong about all of this. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I'm right, but it really felt like that. When I was listening to like Board Game Breakfast and stuff where it first came up. And then after a few weeks, it started to become more of a like, yeah, I really think I'm right on, like that kind of thing. I don't know. That's what it's
sure. I get what you're saying, dude. I mean, like, yeah, I don't know how much, when I heard it, it was from him. And it was definitely saying like, this is something that he'd heard enough people complaining that they couldn't get games that they, these games that were out of print. And then, there's people that were newer to the hobby that were unfamiliar with why those situations arise. I mean, Trent's described a couple of those that I think that are widely familiar to, people in the hobby. Likewise, Trent, why are you still waiting on Upfront?
No, that's not a rights issue. That's somebody left and moved to Australia issue and took everybody's money issue. Yeah, nice.
But that new edition would have had such nice art.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, when I heard it, it certainly was, it was trying to sort of guide people away from, when you get to that point where you've heard enough people complain about it and especially when I think what ends up happening is that, you end up with something that's been mentioned to you in person and then you go online and see that people are kind of saying the same thing. I mean, who knows, maybe the person that you talked to had previously read this article, even if they didn't mention it. And you end up getting this kind of like feeling of being tired of hearing this argument. And then that being tired of hearing the argument leads to you to take a position that's just like, okay, I want to say whatever it takes to like sort of counter this point of view because I don't want to be approached with this type of question every time that a game is unavailable. And I do think that there's wisdom in that there are enough good games, great games.
Yeah.
Like there are so many games that are coming out just in a single year that if you just took only the games in 2019 right now, from now until the end of the year, that were released, I believe that, from that by itself, if that was all that we had from the entire hobby, period, and that means I'm taking all of my favorite games at this point, because I don't really have any favorites that are 2019 releases, and I'm saying they're gone, I think that, there would be enough there to create the joy and the happiness, because it's clear that it didn't need to be, the way that this hobby functions, didn't need to be the way that tabletop functioned throughout antiquity and throughout history. Like, it's not how most people engage with tabletop games. I recently watched a YouTube video that started, it was a review of a Nintendo Switch games, because I was like, curious about it. And they started with the line, and oh man, this was one of those sort of laws, that just really, it immediately made me just, X out of the video. I was like, nope, not listening to you. And it was because this person just really didn't understand, I think, their experience is not the way that they should be characterizing an entire hobby. What they said was, when you're in family gatherings and you're in a family gathering, but the conversation has come, kind of dried up, and everybody's starting to get a little awkward. You want to play a video game, but the older people don't resonate well with the video game. And I thought, first of all, you never know in a family who the gamers are. Like, and especially it runs counter to, to me, this is very, my view is the view. But if you remember when we had Ted from Indiana on the show, and he said the largest video game economic sector is middle-aged women. I mean, like that by itself, runs counter. Like, you don't know what games people have played. And especially, you don't know what type of games, the fact that games are finding ways to resonate with all types of people. So that upset me. And then, of course, this reviewer moves to board games and says, and we all know what it feels like for a board game to result in a hyper-competitive situation. And just like characterizing the entire hobby by being like so hyper-competitive you can't even engage with it, that you can't put a game down in front of a table of family members without them just devolving into like, physical blows. And it just seemed ridiculous to me, that you would be so, I don't know. It was an intro that immediately alienated me from the show. And I don't even think I watched the rest of it because I was just like, you know what? I'm sick of this.
It's a person that doesn't know anything about modern board gaming would say something like that.
Exactly.
They've never played a co-op or even conceived of one.
Mm-hmm. They've only tried to play Sorry and Risk at family gatherings.
Certainly, there are, experiences that I would not want to recreate that have happened in tabletop, and I feel like that sort of mass market, maybe if they tried to, give a little bit more of the caveats of this specific experience and said, this is what's happened in my family or something, like it just, of course the phrasing was more what I took issue with. But, that being said, that like sort of alienating an entire swath of whoever listens to your show, let's try to do that now, guys. I think that Trent, I believe you have a law for us.
It was more of Trent's law is pretty simple, actually. No, basically, if you have a game on your shelf that you're already excited to play, think very carefully before buying another one.
Oh, yeah.
Don't give in to the consumerism.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got a game on your shelf already that you're really excited to play, think carefully before buying another one. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually came up with one too earlier.
All right. Andy?
This is going to show that I have a science background.
Okay.
So Andy's law is, don't tell me your board game law is universally true till you've experimented it out to 6 sigma values.
Jeez, 6 sigma values?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's for the particle accelerator. There's basically at that point a 1 in a million chance you're wrong.
Okay. All right. Great. It's a great law, Andy, once you've explained it.
Okay. Statistics. Everybody loves statistics.
1 in a million shot, Doc. 1 in a million shot.
Yo.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah. Or if it was Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, there's a 1 in a million chance it will happen, so it will happen.
Pretty much. Yeah, I would say that, like, at least for me, the difficult thing, or the law that I wish I could live by that is so tough to remember, is that any of these things that I've mentioned so far, any of the frustration that I get behind me, is that whenever somebody makes any sort of a viewpoint vocal, I think that the immediate just human reaction, I mean, this is, I guess, applies to tabletop because that's how I interact with a lot of information online, through the lens of a hobby that we share interest in. But like whenever somebody comes forth with an opinion, I feel that there's a natural inclination towards balance. And I think that natural inclination towards balance leads our minds to now start just immediately trying to think about counter situations. And so ultimately, I think that any time that you're going to come up with a speculative law all you're going to do is in many cases, people have either decided whether they're for or against you beforehand, as you said, Andy, that sometimes you might, have enough of a chorus or a choir that'll back you up that what you say becomes, essentially a law of sorts to the collective, to the horde, to your cult of personality or whatever. But I think that there's an inclination towards balance, and I think that inclination towards balance, at least towards the more analytical, focused people, and I think a lot of people maybe that don't engage in analytical debate see the entire endeavor as being somewhat futile, because they're like, well, that's your idea, that's your thought, and so they're able to kind of maybe stay more towards the middle and never get swayed in one direction, because even if that's the physical property of every action has an equal and opposite reaction, maybe this is just happening inside our own minds, that there's sort of a balance that needs to be maintained. And yeah, I suppose that anytime I'm come out in favor of a game, I feel like that immediately pits people against the game. And I don't
picking crappy ones. No.
Because you're not going to have the same, I'd be too strong when I talk about it, right? I'm either going to come out, subtly saying things that I feel very deeply, and then maybe you'll feel that I'm not saying them strong enough, and that actually I need to be saying them more. So I don't know. But yeah, I do feel like there's just like that push towards balance, but I do think that somewhere in the push towards balance, the universal truth, I don't want to say universal truth, but a collective truth emerges. And therein lies something you could not call a law because it was like 500 words.
Yeah.
Joe's Law went on for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
How about if Joe has anything to say, he's going to say it. He doesn't have enough time to say it in few words. Like that's the Abraham Lincoln. If I had more time, I'm sorry I wrote you such a long letter. I didn't have the time to write you a shorter one.
Yeah. No, I think my final, like, legitimately serious thought on this is the following, because it's something like, tangent out of board gaming that as a science teacher, I tried to get across to my students constantly. And that is, if you're talking about the complexities of the universe or the complexities of human civilization, if you think there is a short, easy soundbite answer to explain a phenomenon and behavior, you probably don't really actually understand what's going on. Legitimately, just because things are way more complex than humans, I think, like it to be. Like, we like those easy little things to remember as little soundbitey things, but just saying a game is, if it's a good game, it'll be reprinted, or if it's a good game, it'll get a new edition with new artwork. Like, those are just very simplistic statements, and they don't take into account all of the real complexity of reality. And while it's fun to banter around with those little ideas and whatnot, it is good to remember that just because, I don't know, even in our society outside of gaming, it seems like everyone wants the quick, easy solution, or they have the quick answer that would fix everything. And there's just never an easy, quick answer when you're talking about human behavior, human civilization, or the universe around you. Everything is complex.
Yeah. It's more about the endeavor to try, to try to get there is where you realize somewhere along the journey that, like, that was what it was all about. It wasn't really about the destination. It was about the journey. I mean, you get there and it's like, okay, where to now? Yeah. And objectivity, especially clear in a hobby that one does for fun. One does as anybody who's ever tried to cultivate a gaming group, an interest group of any sort, it's so clear that there's just no objectivity. Even when you state a fact that could be an objective fact, the fact that you've chosen that fact, the fact that you've chosen that fact is in and of itself subjective, and there's always at the root of everything that we do in this hobby, subjectivity. Clear Clock, come at me.
Yeah, he doesn't watch us. You know. Go throw it out. Go throw it out on Twitter, and then you'll see.
Probably not. I'm engaging in guerrilla warfare with
guerrilla warfare.
Yeah, it's guerrilla warfare at this point. You know, it stabs in the dark, and then I retreat to the shadows. I am the swamp fox, the swamp fox of the the subjectivity.
I believe that's what the millennials call trolling, right? No, I'm kidding. I'm just
for sure. Yeah. And yeah, I joined the group of millennials that is, you know, trying to find the best like $10 cup of coffee. You know, that
$12 avocado toast.
The asparagus water.
You know, buildings and don't understand how to life yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the key to life is somewhere in the aisles of Whole Foods.
Now, what did I tell someone once that legitimately they were like, does anyone else have this, you know, whole adult thing figured out? And I just responded, I'm like, if any adult tells you they have the whole adult thing figured out, they are lying through their teeth. Nobody has any idea.
No, it's almost like the admission of one's own limitations, which must be somewhere in, you know, you can't be like, I've got this. Because as soon as you say I've got this, it's like, no, you know, you can't. You can't. Yeah, I get it. That's cool. It's a very interesting debate and very interesting discussion, I guess, that we've had here. I wonder what TC would have been able to add. You know, I will ask him. You know, what would be TC's law? But I certainly think that that he would have something interesting. You know, like something about chaos. Maybe he'd give us a joke.
TC's law would be something like, "I'm just helping the already progression of entropy in the universe."
Do I look like I have a plan?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's hype some games because that can be exciting. And we're going to go ahead and kick it off with the most excitement. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you, Andy. You didn't get to hear from you on the review. So let's make up for it here.
Yeah. So like, I've hyped it before, but I'm going to hype again because it's on his way. So the Time of Crisis expansion, The Age of Iron and Rust, has been shipping. I've got my shipping order. It might be before the weekend. But yeah, no, I am totally I can't wait to get my hands on this. Time of Crisis was one of my favorite games that came out of its year. And this expansion just like... Time of Crisis, I think, was a full game, but this kind of makes it a full, like, GMT awesome game. The only things I think I ever slightly regretted about Time of Crisis was that the card pool wasn't big enough. Like, it didn't seem like enough cards to do a lot of...
Not a problem now.
There's going to be plenty more now.
Are they all just available?
You can choose. So it's like you can play like either all old, all new. You can like do a draft, or you can just be like, here is everything. So it's like modular in that way, how you want to do it. Now they have like, instead of just being emperor, it's like, do you want to be a military emperor and give your legions bonuses, or do you want to be a civil emperor and stay at home? There's also
there's a bot system.
Yeah, there's a bot system, because one of the biggest complaints of Time of Crisis were if you're not playing it at like 4 players, you're not playing ideal game. And apparently the bot system is supposed to be very easy. So they're like, now you can always play at 4 players. No problem. And so just, I don't know, all of that just sounds awesome. I even fixed the potentially one issue of it coming in that like there was no available space left in the Time of Crisis box to put an expansion in. So GMT heard its customers. It's like, yeah, if you want to pay for a bigger box, here you go. I did. So, because I'll put all the Time of Crisis in that, and then I'll probably like rewrap the old box in with like paper and stuff, and just store Age of Steam maps in it. So, win-win. But yeah, no, this literally has been like one of my most anticipated releases since it was announced. Like I have been chomping at the bits to get my hands on this thing. So,
great name.
Yeah,
like it's from a war game company, and they are great at names.
Yeah.
Great
Although
naming.
there is something to be said of the lovely charm of the Hollenspiel naming system.
Like the game box says 150 to 210 minutes. Now I don't remember that being the case in the original. I guess 2 to 3 hours. Now it says 2.5 to like 3.5 hours. So
I think that's the case if you play with everything.
Yeah. And even then, I don't think the first one like would take as long if people were comfortable with the system. Like that's a game that I think the playtime would come down a bit once you knew what you were doing. There's just a lot of choices in the game, or it seems like there is right up front. So like parsing through that can be a bit, but I played it like after the third game, I think I played it, but it was just like boom, 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 turn done, boom, 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 turn done. But and once you get that procedure down, like do this, then buy cards, next player go. Once that smooths out and everything, like, yeah, it'll be fine. And it's a nice little combination Euro war game. You got that Euro fun deck building element. And then you got your war gamey, combat-y kind of thing. So I don't know. I'm just really excited to get it. And I really want to get it to the table. I love me some Time of Crisis.
I definitely want to try this new expansion, and I think, Trent, you've already voiced your support for it, and the fact that it is being mailed right now to the both of you shows. Yeah, I'm excited because I think that more choices within this system, it to me could offer me some different directions to be able to kind of ignore some of the elements that I wasn't so impressed with, that weren't my favorites. So excited myself as well to try Time of Crisis: The Age of Iron and Rust. All right. I almost put my hype in here as a troll, so I'm just going to quickly use it so that way we don't end on this. But I am hyping the Railroad Rivals Robber Baron expansion, mainly because this is basically 1830, Andy. I'm doing your job here and giving a voice to the train games that are available. That right now on Kickstarter, if you check out Railroad Rivals Robber Baron, to me there is actually some pretty exciting elements to this game. I wonder where it sits as what seems to be a simplified cube rails game, where it's almost like, imagine the 18 Lilliput. What 18 Lilliput does is it very much abstracts 18xx games into very simple cards that are just like it's only, instead of hexes, they're only 4 sides. They're just squares. Well, Railroad Rivals is a smaller cube rails game that basically abstracts the normal cube rails map into a similar 18 Lilliput structure, where it's just basically a square tile that is a city, and you'll just open up connections to other cities without actually having to build the track that represents them.
It kind of made me feel like if Carcassonne and 18xx had a baby. A little bit.
Yeah, maybe even Carcassonne and like cube rails, because I'm not even sure if 18xx. I guess it does have share value.
Yeah, there's a share value, and you do get some of the tiles are literally shares in a company. So, well, it could still be cube because I know
cube rails have that too. Yeah,
some cube rails have share values and stuff. Yeah,
this one has some expansion content that does look to more mimic what 18xx games have, though, Andy, and that is like the stock. They call it stock shenanigans, which. It does kind of take a little bit of the fun out of it when you call it shenanigans, because it's like, okay, I'm going to call shenanigans on this. Whereas when you come up with it on your own, then it's a shenanigan. But if you call a tile stock shenanigans tile, that's my groan for that.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's about all I know.
Like you can dump things on people now. That always makes it fun.
It does look pretty interesting in terms of the new directions it looks to add. It also adds a 6th player, which looks like a pretty small expansion. that's kind of rounded out by the fact it comes with a 6-player. But I would say I was a bit disappointed. You know, I certainly was not going to back this project after I learned that they only had 30. Like, there's a premium wood edition of the original Railroad Rivals. And they only had 30 copies that came with that original premium wood edition and the new Robber Baron wood edition as well. So you can get as many of the wood edition as you want of the original, but I mean, I understand that it's because they probably only had that many left over and they're not going to be doing a whole nother, you know, like print run for that. But it's certainly like just only having 30 copies, like, whew, that seems like if I don't have the original Robber Barons, like that's, you know, one of those things that I specifically look to 18XX, Jesus, look to Kickstarter for, you know, to have those sort of cool editions. And if I don't have the original edition, I'm not going to be buying the wood edition. Like, you know, so I suppose I feel like they narrowed their audience to only people that bought the original wood edition, unless you got one of those 30, you know, there and gone copies. If you are interested in a regular retail copy, of course, available $69 if you want both the base game and the expansion, or the expansion by itself is like $30. So check them out. Railroad Rivals, the Robber Baron expansion, of course, taking 1830 to the next level.
Carcassonne?
Yes. More like just to the next castle. But the next level certainly Carcassonne.
Catapult equivalent now. It's like catapult your trains at other people or something.
Yeah. Well, finally, the downfall of this episode.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about, as some of the longtime listeners know, I'm a big fan of single session storytelling RPGs like Fiasco and Dread and Tin Candles and stuff. Downfall is the kind of the one I'm into lately. So Downfall is one that's specifically for 3 players. You have to play it with 3. And in it, basically, the first half of the game, more or less, you're like making and collectively coming up with the civilization. Except the civilization has some sort of inherent flaw in it. Like maybe it's a first past the post voting system like we have here in the United States. Maybe you could say that's the fatal flaw. Whatever you could think of a fatal flaw of a civilization being. Then once that's done, you figured out your civilization, you detailed it, and you figured out what the flaw is. You have 3 characters. One of you is in favor of basically gunning it and having more of whatever the flaw is. Another character wants less of the flaw and wants to fix it. And the other one's neutral and thinks the status quo is fine. So the antagonist is the person that wants more of the flaw. And the protagonist is the person that wants to actually fix it. And the other one's like the status quo is the person in the middle. And then basically you play a game where you're acting this out. Now, obviously, it'd be extremely easy to translate this into modern America.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm already thinking of it.
But the fun of this is you can make a book, you can make up any sort of fantasy, sci-fi, whatever you want. The book has a bunch of examples of different ones you can do in it. But I found that what I felt in working through it a little bit, not playing a full game of it, but working through it a little bit was, like, even if you're coming up with something very fantastic, it ends up doing a really good job of feeling fairly real. Because you're doing that. And I think because of the state of the world right now, you can take something that's very fantasy and abstract, and it's still the current nature of the world makes that feel more real. And the system does a really good job of that. And so I give it a thumbs up if you're into that kind of storytelling RPG stuff, but you want something with a little more realistic meat on it so you can feel like it has some real world impact. Look at Downfall. It's really interesting.
That's very interesting. I did not realize what this was at all. So is it primarily played in multiples of 3 players, or
you only can play it with 3?
Okay.
There's no DM. You just play it with 3. It's like Fiasco. You don't need a DM.
Sure. Yeah. Fiasco is played with 4, and
it can be played at 4 is probably the ideal number for Fiasco, but you can play it with a few more. You can probably play it with about 3 to 6.
Okay. Sure. Probably. I haven't checked the box or anything. It seemed
3
like
to 5, something like that. Somewhere in that range.
I've played it with 4. Well, that's really interesting. A 3-player RPG, and it sounds like this is really taking that 3 players and using it as, having somebody toe the line while somebody tries to pull them in one direction, somebody tries to pull them in the other direction. That right there is kind of what your biggest 3-player games look to, in some way emulate. And here you have an RPG that does so.
Yeah, and like a lot of these RPGs, they give you a bunch of like example scenarios if you don't really know what to do with it at first. There's a whole bunch of examples in there, like here's the flaw, here's what the antagonist to be like, here's what the protagonist to be like. It gives you a whole bunch of those examples, but the fun of it's kind of making up your own.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you a system for doing that, and yeah.
Gotcha. Is this so there's a 2017 and a 2015 one? I guess I don't know if they are.
This is 2017, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
It's published by Less Than 3 Games.
Less Than 3. That one, it says Frenzy Kitty. So Less Than 3 Games is this one right here. I'll drop it in the chat. It's crazy. It's a diceless one, so
yep.
And GM-less. Very interested in this. It's designed by looks like the name of Caroline Hobbs. So, wow, very, very interesting and food for thought for certain.
Yep.
Well, thanks for sharing that. Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for sharing that, Trent. I'm glad because I haven't heard from you in a while. I have not heard from you about, the things that you've been playing in that aspect for a long time. So I'm glad to hear that you are still, kicking it with the RPG games, especially now that your Gloomhaven campaign has come to a close. So what a cool little game. I certainly want to try this. And I think that we almost do this every time that we do a 3-person episode with you, me, and Andy. Now, I will let you decide who it is that's trying to push us towards the downfall. But I guess I will pull a little bit of a Norm here and apologize just in case.
You can argue about who's pulling the downfall and who's not, but I'm pretty sure I'm the status quo.
Probably. Oh goodness, Andy, you might have just got thrown under the bus, but
I wouldn't expect anything.
Andy's not even disputing it either, so.
It might be me, though. I might be the one that's thrown us under the bus. It's pretty tough to know. But whatever it is, we're both certainly determined that our way is right. You wouldn't do that if you didn't think so. Well, I'll leave our listeners that to think on. This has been an awesome time talking with the both of you. Once again, one last well wish to TC and things that he's going through. He couldn't be here tonight, so hope everything is well with you, TC, wherever you be. And I hope everybody out there listening has a great week of gaming, and you'll catch us next week here on The Good, The Bored, and The Ugly.